Hello and welcome to the Nobel Prize Award ceremony here at the Stockholm Concert Hall. Here we see some of the over 1,500 guests assembled here for the prize ceremony held on December 10th, as every year, the anniversary of Alfred Nobel's death. Alfred Nobel, that we see here as a statue. The Swedish inventor and industrialist who in his will created this prize, and since 1901 it's been awarded to the people who have contributed the most to advances in the sciences of physics, chemistry, medicine, and to the most distinguished authors alive. And here we see some of previous laureates that are present here today. For instance, Christian Nyslin-Volhart, and we have members of the Swedish Academy that choose the literature laureate, who this year is Bob Dylan, who will not be here in person, but the closest we will get is his friend and partner out on the tour scene, Patti Smith, who will be performing one of his songs. And here we see Angus Deaton, last year's economics laureate, here as a guest this year, sitting just in front of one of the Swedish authors who are part of the cultural establishment represented here this evening. And yes, as we saw, last year's economics laureate reminds us that in 1969, since 1969, there is also a prize in economics, the Swedish Central Bank's prize in economic sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. And in total, 5 prizes will be delivered from the hands of His Majesty the King of Sweden here today, celebrating 5 disciplines with 10 excellent scientists and 1 very special literature laureate, as I said earlier, Bob Dylan. And yes, well, he won't be here in person, but he has said that the news about the Nobel Prize left me speechless, and he also said that he appreciates the honor so much. In a little while, we will hear presentation speeches about this year's prizes, and they will receive, the laureates will receive their medals and diplomas one by one from the hand of His Majesty the King of Sweden. We lay our eyes on this year's floral arrangement, which is, as the tradition has it, flowers sent here from the city of San Remo, the place where Alfred Nobel lived during the last years of his life. In total, 22,000 flowers, 300 kilos of green leaves, giving a feeling of spring on the stage. This year, pink hues dominate, as you can see, inspired by Japanese cherry blossoms. We do have a Japanese laureate this year in medicine, physiology or medicine. The prize is awarded to Honorary Professor Yoshinori Osumi. And we will hear some music as well. The Royal Stockholm Philharmonic Orchestra, under the baton of conductor Marie Rosenmyr, will provide musical interludes during the awards ceremony. Marie is a versatile musician and one of Sweden's most promising young conductors. And the soloist at the award ceremony is Patti Smith. She will perform A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall by this year's literature laureate Bob Dylan. And here we see some of the Swedish party leaders. In the center, the Swedish right-wing party, Anna Kinberg Batra, and her husband to the left there. And among the 1,500 guests are, of course, the Nobel laureates and their family and friends. Each of them can bring 15 persons in total to the prize ceremony and the banquet. But some have come to Stockholm with a lot more friends. I think that one of them has no less than 68 friends in his company. Here we see some more party leaders from the Swedish Parliament. And we also have representatives from the academic societies, such as the awarding bodies of the Nobel Foundation. We are waiting for the royal family to enter. They will sit on stage, and there we will have His Majesty the King of Sweden and Queen Sylvia and Crown Princess Victoria and her husband Prince Daniel. So those are the 4 seats that are to the right, the royal seats. And the chairman of the board of the Nobel Foundation, Professor Carl-Henrik Helldin, will hold an opening address, after which this year's Nobel laureates will be presented. And we have had the prize ceremony here in Stockholm's concert hall for many, many years. And the tradition has it that afterwards the guests go a short distance to the City Hall, where the banquet commences around 7 o'clock this evening, Swedish time. Now we see members of the royal family, Prince Carl Philip and his wife Princess Sofia, entering here, as Princess Madeleine and her husband Mr. Christopher O'Neill. Now time for the Swedish royal anthem. His Majesty the King of Sweden entering with Queen Sylvia, Crown Princess Victoria and Prince Daniel. Stefan Löfven with his wife Ulla. Performing a march in D major by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Under the baton of Marie Rosenmeier. To this march we have the Nobel laureates entering here. Physics laureate David Thouless, followed by physics laureate Duncan Haldane and physics laureate Michael Kosterlitz. And then chemistry laureate Jean-Pierre Sauvage, followed by Fraser Stoddart and chemics laureate Ben Feringa. Duncan Haldane. This year's medicine laureate Yoshinori Osumi from Japan. Followed by this year's 2 economics laureates, Mr. Oliver Hart and Bengt Holmström. Duncan Haldane, and Michael Kostelitz, physics. In the chemistry chairs, Jean-Pierre Sauvage from France, who works in Strasbourg, Fraser Stoddart, and Ben Ferija, Yoshinori Osumi, medicine laureate, Oliver Hart at Harvard, and Bengt Holmström at MIT, this year's economics laureates. Now time for what we came here for.
Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, esteemed Nobel laureates, ladies and gentlemen.
Professor Carl-Henrik Helldin.
On behalf of the Nobel Foundation, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to this year's Nobel Prize Award ceremony, which is held to honor the laureates for their outstanding contributions to science and literature. In particular, I would like to wish the Nobel laureates and their families welcome to the ceremony. Earlier today, in Oslo, President Juan Manuel Santos received the Nobel Peace Prize for his resolute efforts to bring the more than 50-year-long civil war in Colombia to an end. We are gathered here today to honor science, humanism, and peaceful coexistence. We are here as individuals, not as representatives of states, groups, or interests. In 1895, Alfred Nobel wrote in his will that no consideration should be given to nationality, that the most worthy should receive the prize. Nobel himself was born in Sweden, but worked abroad for much of his life, in St. Petersburg, in Paris, and in San Remo. He spoke 5 languages and worked with people from different cultures with different religious backgrounds. Nobel was a true cosmopolitan, convinced of the value of extensive cross-border contacts. Alfred Nobel was also influenced by the New Enlightenment, a period during the late 19th century when new political ideas emerged. There was strong optimism, which was manifested in recurring world exhibitions, spectacular structures like the Eiffel Tower, and arenas for peaceful international competitions, such as the Olympic Games. It was also an era of rapid economic expansion, with millions of people being rescued from poverty thanks to industrialization and entrepreneurship. Meanwhile, it was also an era that was strongly shaped by nationalism, xenophobia, and military threats, developments that would culminate in the horrendous First World War. Much of what was topical for Alfred Nobel in the late 19th century also characterizes the world of today. Billions of people have been lifted out of poverty by globalization and international trade. Many people around the world are addressing major challenges facing humanity. Researchers are making fantastic scientific discoveries. Authors and poets are writing about difficult existential issues. And dedicated leaders are making efforts to achieve peace. These are contributions that we are rewarding today with the Nobel Prize. But just as in the era of Alfred Nobel, today there are dark clouds in the sky around the world. Terrorist acts are a part of many people's daily lives, and wars are underway in many places. International cooperation, cross-border movements, and openness are being criticized. Science and knowledge are being questioned for instance, regarding climate change. Leading politicians, both in Europe and in the US, are winning votes by denying knowledge and scientific truths. Populism is widespread and is reaping major political successes. The grim truth is that we can no longer take for granted that people believe in science, facts, and knowledge. In times like these, the Nobel Prize is important. Alfred Nobel wanted to reward those who have conferred the greatest benefit to mankind. He understood the power of example, and this is a central concept behind his will. Good role models show by their words and deeds that it is possible to understand the world and to improve it. They confirm that people can tackle the biggest challenges of our era. Doing so requires creative and courageous individuals who are willing to take the lead, find solutions, and broaden our awareness. Alfred Nobel wanted the Nobel Prize to contribute to a better world. And he wanted us to be inspired by the Nobel laureates and what they have achieved for humanity. This is why we have developed public activities over the past 20 years that are based on all this accumulated knowledge and which should inspire learning, reflection, and questioning. During the days when the 2016 laureates were being announced, 100 million people engaged with us through our digital channels. There is an enormous interest in learning about the scientific and humanistic advances that are rewarded with the Nobel Prize. In light of this, we are pleased that the new Nobel Center, the Nobel Prize's own building, is about to take shape here in Stockholm. The Nobel Center will be a place where the fascinating stories of the Nobel laureates and their discoveries will be at display. It will also be a global platform with education, knowledge, and critical thinking at its heart, where the major challenges of tomorrow will be discussed. Albert Camus, who received the 1957 Nobel Prize in Literature, said that the 17th century was the century of mathematics, the 18th that of the physical sciences, and the 19th that of biology. Our 20th century is the century of fear. The 21st century has begun with a growing sense of fear, and there is a concern that conflicts will characterize this century as well. But such a development is not predestined. It is our task to influence how our era will be described, and there are good reasons to be hopeful. We see a growing interest among young people in seeking knowledge, and we see an ever-increasing engagement in tackling major global challenges. This is where the Nobel Prize has an important task: to serve as a source of inspiration for people who want to build a better world. This is the truly amazing legacy left by Alfred Nobel 120 years after his death. Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, esteemed Nobel laureates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, and once again, most welcome to this year's Nobel Prize Award ceremony.
Those were the words of Professor Carl-Henrik Kjeldin, Chairman of the Board of the Nobel Foundation. Now a small musical interlude quadrille from The Wedding of the Eiffel Tower by Germaine Taillefer. time for Professor Thors Hans Hansson, who is member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences and also member of the Nobel Committee for Physics, to present this year's Nobel Prize in Physics.
Eders Majestäter, Eders Kungliga Högheter,
Your Majesties, Royal Highnesses, esteemed Nobel laureates,
kära kollegor i det internationella
dear colleagues in the
vetenskapssamhället,
international
mina
community
damer
of
och herrar.
scholars, ladies and gentlemen. Physics is a human activity. Like all such activities, it evolves in the context of historical, geographic, and linguistic settings. Nonetheless, the central results of physics, natural laws, transcend these barriers. They are the same today as they were at inception, and they will also be valid in the future. They are the same here on Earth as on the exotic planets that we now know are orbiting distant stars. The laws of physics are universal, and they are formulated in the language of mathematics. This extraordinary universality is closely connected to the fundamental properties of space-time and matter, which are reflected in the form of symmetries in the laws of physics. A branch of mathematics used to describe symmetries is called group theory and was substantially developed during the 19th century. Only later did this mathematics turn out to be an indispensable tool in the new quantum theory that revolutionized physics during the 20th century. The role of group theory in quantum mechanics is but one example of how major scientific breakthroughs often require new language. And since the language of physics is mathematical, breakthroughs in physics often require new mathematics. Newton developed the theory of derivatives and integrals at the same time as his mechanics. And Einstein formulated his general theory of relativity in terms of the then contemporary mathematics of curved spaces, which was unfamiliar to physicists. Mathematical language is abstract, but it has two major virtues. A mathematically formulated theory is quantitative and can therefore often be used to, in detail and with high precision, explain and predict the results of experiments. Mathematics is deductive, so mathematical arguments can be used to predict the results of future experiments. The discovery of the Higgs particle is a striking example. Deduction is indeed an important tool in all the sciences, but it excels in theoretical physics. Many philosophers, physicists and mathematicians have marveled at the astonishing ability of mathematics to describe nature. In a famous essay, Eugene Wigner called this the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. This year's Nobel Prize in Physics rewards contributions to theoretical physics that are examples of precisely this unreasonable effectiveness. By using new concepts taken from the branch of mathematics called topology, the 2016 laureates did two things. First, they explained striking observations, and second, they made theoretical discoveries. That is, they predicted new phenomena that were observed later. Topology describes the robust properties of objects. Topologically, an egg and a football belong to the same category, the category of three-dimensional objects without holes. But a donut, along with a wedding ring, belongs to the category of objects with one hole. The number of holes, which is always an integer, is an example of a topological invariant. Quantum mechanics was born as a theory of microscopic objects, individual atoms and molecules, but it also soon came to be used in order to understand the usual phases of matter, gases, liquids and solids. Superfluids and superconductors were also added to these. Here too, symmetry concepts proved extremely important. By studying symmetry properties, Lev Landau was able to classify possible phases of matter and describe the mechanisms of the transitions between them. This year's laureates showed that Landau's classification of the phases of matter was incomplete. There are additional so-called topological phases with characteristic values for different topological invariants. With the aid of topology, they also showed how one can explain observed transitions between different phases of matter that should not be possible according to earlier theory. It often takes time before new concepts and new ways of thinking have an impact. But during the past decade, research in the topological phases of matter has virtually exploded. Today's young physicists work with topological concepts as self-confidently and skillfully as earlier generations have done with derivatives, symmetries and geometry. Not only have this year's laureates made important special discoveries, but in addition, and perhaps most importantly, they have set the stage for a new way of describing matter. They have given us a rich mathematical language with deep and beautiful abstract concepts. But in the natural sciences, beauty is not enough. Mathematics is full of beautiful results. Truth is also necessary. This requires experiments and measurements. The theory of topological matter has passed this test with distinction. It combines truth with beauty. This is theoretical physics at its best.
Professor Thouless, Professor Haldane, Professor Kostelitz, you have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for, I quote the citation, theoretical discoveries of topological phase transition and topological phases of matter. On behalf of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, it's my honor and my pleasure to convey to you the warmest congratulations. I now ask you to step forward to receive your Nobel Prizes from the hands of His Majesty the King.
First, Professor David Thouless, US and British citizen, born in 1934 in the United Kingdom. He is affiliated with the University of Washington in the US. Receiving the diploma and the medal from the hands of His Majesty the King of Sweden. Professor Duncan Haldane now, also British citizen, born in 1951 in the United Kingdom. He is affiliated with Princeton University in the US. Proud recipient of this year's Nobel Prize in Physics. Now, time for Professor Michael Kostelitz, US and British citizen, born in 1943 in the United Kingdom. He is affiliated now with Brown University in the US. Congratulated by King Carl Gustaf. family and friends enjoying this moment in the audience. After the prize in physics, it's time to present the prize in chemistry. Professor Olof Ramström.
Eders majestäter, eders kungliga högheter,
Majesties,
ärade pristagare,
Royal Highness,
mina damer
Your
och herrar.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
Den mänskliga utvecklingen är starkt förknippad med maskiner. Dessa har hjälpt oss att klara av uppgifter
Machines are an
som
integral
faller
part of
utanför
human
vår egen
development,
förmåga
helping
och på
us to
många
perform
sätt
tasks that
lett
often
till
fall
högre livskvalitet.
beyond our capacities.
Under årtusenden har
Over the
vårt samhälle
millennia,
åtnjutit en
our
ständigt
society
ökande
has
mängd
enjoyed
användbara
an
maskiner
ever-increasing
för
plethora of
olika
useful machines for
Kanske
various
särskilt den
purposes,
industriella
in many ways
revolutionen
leading to an
har med
enhanced
sina
quality of our
viktigaste
lives.
upptäckter
This progress has in particular accelerated
fört
since the
utvecklingen
Industrial
stort steg
Revolution,
framåt och
with its key
dramatiskt
discoveries resulting in a
förändrat världen.
giant leap forward and dramatically changing the world.
Idag ser vi början av en ny revolution
Today,
som kommer
we
att
are at
föra
the
oss
dawn
ännu
of a
ett
new
stort steg framåt.
revolution that will bring us yet another giant
Mänskligheten har
leap
alltid
forward.
strävat efter att
Humankind
tänja på
has
gränserna
always
för
striven to
maskinens
push the limits of machine
funktion.
function and
Till
construction.
exempel med
For
avseende
example,
på hur
regarding how
små
small they
dessa
can be
kan
made.
göras.
The ultimate limit of this endeavor is to make molecular-sized machine structures that are less than 1,000th of the width of a human hair.
Mindre än en tusendel av bredden på ett mänskligt hårstrå.
This
Denna
fundamental
grundläggande utmaning
challenge has
har
been met by
antagits
this
av
year's
årets
laureates,
pristagare
who have
som
successfully
framgångsrikt
demonstrated that
visat
the
att
rational
rationell
design and
utformning
synthesis
och syntes
of molecular machines
av
are
molekylära
indeed
maskiner
possible.
faktiskt är möjlig.
A groundbreaking step in this development was taken in the early 1980s, when Jean-Pierre Sauvage and his group discovered an efficient way to make molecules that are attached to each other using mechanical bonds. The group that thus managed to link two molecular rings together in a so-called catenane, where the rings could move freely relative each without being separated. This marked a breakthrough towards molecular machinery, and Sauvage was able to show how such structures can undergo controlled motion. By the turn of the 1990s, Fraser Stoddart, as we see here, and his group made other important advances towards molecular machinery. For example, the group used another type of mechanical bond and developed so-called rotaxanes, in which a ring-shaped molecule was tied to move between set positions along an axle. Both Stoddart and Sauvage were also able to show how the movement in these structures could be controlled from external input, and subsequently developed a wide range of machine-like structures, such as molecular muscles, actuators, elevators, memories, motors, and pumps. The motor components are of central importance in machines able to drive other parts of the construction. By the late 1990s, Ben Feringa and his group made a significant breakthrough when they demostrated a molecular rotary motor. The construction was driven by light and heat and was based on isomerizable bonds and molecular asymmetry, where the motor parts could rotate unidirectionally relative each other. The group was later able to improve the design to create motors that can rotate in either direction at very high speeds, and showed how the components can affect the rotation of much larger objects. In a more playful example, Feringa's group also constructed a four-wheel drive nanocar that can move over a surface. Through the design and synthesis of very challenging structures, combined with the understanding and development of controlled motion and function, Sauvage, Stoddart and Feringa have created functional molecular machines. Their work has formed the basis for an entirely new field of research for which the three laureates have been groundbreaking pioneers and sources of inspiration.
Jean-Pierre Sauvage, Sir Fraser Stoddart and Ben Feringa. You are being awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the design and synthesis of molecular machines. On behalf of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, I wish to convey to you our warmest congratulations. May I now ask you to step forward and receive your Nobel Prizes from the hands of His Majesty the King.
First, Professor Jean-Pierre Sauvage, a French citizen born in 1944 in France, affiliated with the University of Strasbourg in France. Professor Fraser Stoddart is a US and British citizen, born in 1942 in the United Kingdom and now affiliated with Northwestern University in the US. He's here in Stockholm accompanied by his 2 daughters and their families, including 4 grandchildren. Professor Bernard Feringa is a Dutch citizen, born in 1951 in the Netherlands, affiliated with the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. He's here in Stockholm with his wife Elisabeth Rothmar, 3 daughters and other family members. Now time for some music again. We will hear Orford Ness from the Suffolk Suite by Doreen Carwithen, performed by the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, conductor Marie Rosenli. is called Philip, and his wife, Sophia, Princess Sophia. King Carl Gustaf and Queen Silvia and Prince Daniel. Now time for the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, as it is called, the Medicine Prize, presented by Professor Nils-Göran Larsson from Karolinska Institutet, a member of the Nobel Committee for the Medicine Prize.
Eders Majestäter, Eders
Majesties,
Kungliga
Your Royal
Högheter,
Highnesses, esteemed
ärade
laureates,
pristagare,
ladies and
mina
gentlemen.
damer och herrar. Vi har idag
Today we have
samlats
gathered
i
for the awarding of this year's
utdelningen
Nobel
av
Prize
årets
in the
Nobelpris i
Stockholm
Konserthuset,
Concert Hall,
ett
one
av
of Sweden's
Sveriges
architectural
arkitektoniska
masterpieces,
mästerverk
which was
som
inaugurated in
invigdes redan
1926.
1926.
The concert hall
Konserthuset är i
is
gott
in
skick
good
trots
shape
flitig
despite
användning
intensive
under
use
många
over many
decennier.
decades,
Tack
thanks to
vare
repairs and
reparation och
maintenance.
underhåll. Idag är det
Today
också
it is also
utställt
newly
och
cleaned and
och
spotless.
förbrukningsartiklar
The
som
consumables
tidigare
that previous
gäster
guests have left
lämnat
behind have been
efter sig
collected and
har
hopefully recycled.
omhändertagits och förhoppningsvis återvunnits. We
view this daily maintenance as something self-evident. But if the concert hall had not been repaired or cleaned in 90 years, this would of course have been obvious to us. Similarly, our body's cells are constantly replacing defective components and removing waste materials. This year's Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine is about how the cell maintains its interior and recycles its own components in order to function optimally and adapt to new circumstances. The cell's degradation station, the lysosome, was identified by biochemical methods as early as 1955 by the Belgian scientist Christian de Duve. For this discovery, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1974. Shortly after the discovery of the lysosome, several researchers using electron microscopy showed that lysosomes seem to exist in all organisms having nucleated cells. They also observed that lysosomes could sometimes be full of normal cellular components in various stages of decomposition. Remarkably, it appeared as if the cell could break down some of its own contents. In 1963, Christian de Duve named this process autophagy, which means self-eating. In the following decades, some progress was made in our understanding of autophagy, but fundamental questions remained unanswered. Is autophagy crucial to normal cell function? If so, how is autophagy regulated? Is autophagy important in human disease? When Yoshinori Ohsumi, that we see here, was in his early 40s, he was eager to make new major scientific advances. In the late 1980s, he therefore decided to take on a whole new area of research, cell degradation processes. Ohsumi predicted that degradation might very well be a process just as important as the production of new components in a cell. For his studies, he chose to use ordinary baker's yeast. Yeast cells are unicellular eukaryotes. nucleated organisms that can be used as model systems for understanding fundamental processes also found in human cells. By employing a brilliant experimental strategy, Osumi was able to show that autophagy actually does occur in yeast. He then carried out a series of very elegant studies that enabled him to identify a number of genes that are vital in regulating autophagy. Osumi went on to show new, completely unexpected biochemical mechanisms that are controlled by these genes. It also soon turned out that the cellular machinery that controls autophagy is highly conserved and is found in all organisms containing nucleated cells. The discovery of the molecular machinery of autophagy revolutionized Osumi's entire field of research. And we know today that autophagy is a very important maintenance process that ensures the normal functioning of our cells. For example, autophagy plays a key role when we adjust our metabolism to fasting and starvation. Impairments in the regulation of autophagy are linked to a variety of human diseases, such as diabetes, cancer, infections, and severe disorders of the nervous system. Thanks to Osumi's fundamental discoveries, we now know that autophagy plays a fundamental role in many different biological processes.
Professor Osumi, your groundbreaking research has solved a long-standing enigma in biology and revealed mechanisms for how our cells recycle components and combat disease. With a series of brilliant experiments, you have opened up a new field in biology. On behalf of the Nobel Assembly at Karolinska Institutet, it is my great privilege to convey to you our warmest congratulations. I now ask you to step forward to receive your Nobel Prize from the hands of His Majesty the King.
Honorary Professor Yoshinori Osumi, a Japanese citizen born in 1945 in Japan, is affiliated with the Tokyo Institute of Technology. Wife Mariko Osumi and his two sons who join in here in Stockholm for this proud moment. Now we will hear a serenade from King Christian II, suite by Jean Sibelius. hear the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra performing Serenade from King Christian II's Suite by Finnish composer Jean Sibelius. So we will hear music of a different kind, something that a lot of people probably have heard before, performed by Patti Smith, because now time for the Literature Prize presented by Horace Engdahl, member of the Swedish Academy.
Eders Majestäter,
Your Majesties,
Eders Kungliga
Your Royal
Högheter,
Highnesses,
ärade
Your
Nobelpristagare,
Excellencies,
mina damer och herrar.
ladies and gentlemen.
Hur
What brings
sker
about the great
de
shifts
stora omvälvningarna i
in the world of
litteraturens
literature?
värld? Ofta
Often it
genom att
is
någon tar
when
en
someone seizes
enkel
upon a
och
simple,
ringaktad form som
overlooked
ännu inte
form,
räknas till
discounted as
konsten
art
i högre
in
mening
the higher sense,
och får den
and
att
makes
mutera.
it mutate.
Så blev den
Thus,
moderna
at one
romanen
point
till
emerged the
en
modern
gång ur
novel
anekdot
from
och
anecdote
brev.
and letter.
Så föddes den
Thus
nya tidens
arose drama in a new age from high jinks on planks placed on barrels in the marketplace. Thus songs in the vernacular dethroned learned Latin poetry. Thus too did La Fontaine take animal fables and Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales from the nursery to Parnassian heights. Each time this occurs, our idea of literature changes. In itself, it ought not to be a sensation that a singer-songwriter now stands recipient of the Literary Nobel Prize. In a distant past, all poetry was sung or tunefully recited. Poets were rhapsodes, bards, troubadours. Lyrics comes from lyre. But what Bob Dylan did was not to return to the Greeks or the Provençals. Instead, he dedicated himself, body and soul, to 20th century American popular music, the kind played on radio stations and gramophone records for ordinary people, white and black, protest songs, country, blues, early rock, gospel, mainstream music. He listened day and night, testing the stuff on his instruments, trying to learn. But when he started to write similar songs, they came out differently. In his hands, the material changed. From what he discovered in heirloom and scrap, in banal rhyme and quick wit, in curses and pious prayers, sweet nothings and crude jokes, he panned poetry gold. Whether on purpose or by accident is irrelevant. All creativity begins in imitation. Even after 50 years of uninterrupted exposure, we are yet to absorb music's equivalent of the fable's Flying Dutchman. He makes good rhymes, said a critic, explaining greatness. And it is true. His rhyming is an alchemical substance that dissolves contexts to create new ones, scarcely containable by the human brain. It was a shock. With the public expecting poppy folk songs, there stood a young man with a guitar, fusing the languages of the street and the Bible into a compound that would have made the end of the world seem a superfluous replay. At the same time, he sang of love with the power of conviction everyone wants to own. All of a sudden, much of the bookish poetry in our world felt anemic. And the routine song lyrics his colleagues continued to write were like old-fashioned gunpowder following the invention of dynamite. Soon, people stopped comparing him to Woody Guthrie and Hank Williams and turned instead to Blake, Rimbaud, Whitman, Shakespeare. In the most unlikely setting of all, the commercial gramophone record, he gave back to the language of poetry its elevated style, lost since the Romantics. Not to sing of eternities, but to speak of what was happening around us, as if the Oracle of Delphi were reading the evening news. Recognizing that revolution by awarding Bob Dylan the Nobel Prize was a decision that seemed daring only beforehand and already seems obvious. But does he get the prize for upsetting the system of literature? No, not really. There is a simpler explanation, one that we share with all those who stand with beating hearts in front of the stage at one of the venues on his never-ending tour, waiting for that magical voice. Chamfort made the observation that when a master such as La Fontaine appears, the hierarchy of genres, the estimation of what is great and small, high and low in literature is nullified. What matter the rank of a work when its beauty is of the highest rank, he wrote. That is the straight answer to the question of how Bob Dylan belongs in literature, as the beauty of his songs is of the highest rank. By means of his oeuvre, Bob Dylan has changed our idea of what poetry can be and how it can work. He is a singer worthy of a place beside the Greeks, beside Ovid, beside the romantic visionaries, beside the kings and queens of the blues, beside the forgotten masters of brilliant standards. If people in the literary world groan, one must remind that the gods don't write, they dance and they sing. The good wishes of the Swedish Academy follow Mr. Dylan on his way to coming bandstands. Standing ovations for this year's Literature Prize here in the Stockholm Concert Hall. The 1,500 guests will now hear one of Bob Dylan's most famous songs, A Hard Rain's a Gonna Fall. Orchestration by Hans Ek, performed by Patti Smith.
Where you been, my blue-eyed son? Where have you been, my darling young one? I've stumbled alongside of 12 misty mountains. I've walked and I've crawled down 6 crooked highways. I've stepped in the middle of 7 sad forests. Been out in front of a 12 dead oceans. Been 10,000 miles on the mouth of a graveyard. It's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rain's gonna fall. What did you see, my blue-eyed son? What did you see, my darling young one? Saw a newborn babe with wild wolves all around it. Saw a highway of diamonds with nobody on it. I saw a black branch with blood that kept dripping. I saw a babe that was just bleeding. I saw a babe that... I'm sorry. Earth. It's all 10... I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Could we start that section? I apologize. Sorry, I'm so nervous.
Please start again. We want to hear it.
So a newborn babe with wild wolves all around it. So a highway of diamonds with nobody on it. I saw a black branch with blood that kept dripping. Saw a room full of men whose hammers were bleeding. I saw a white ladder all covered with water. Saw 10,000 talkers whose tongues were all broken. I saw guns and sharp swords in the hands of young children. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rain's gonna fall. What did you hear, my blue-eyed son? And what did you hear, my darling young one? Heard the sound of a thunder that roared out a warning. Heard the roar of a wave that could drown the whole world. Heard one person laughing, heard many people laughing. Heard nobody listening. Heard one person starve, heard many people laughing. Heard the song of a poet who died in the gutter. Heard the sound of a clown that cried in the alley. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rain's gonna fall. Who did you meet, my blue-eyed son? And who did you meet, my darling young one? I met a young child beside a dead pony. I met a young man and had a black dog. I met a young woman whose body was burning. I met a young girl, she gave me a rainbow. I met young man, he was wounded in love. I met another man, he was wounded in hatred. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rain's gonna fall. What do you do now, my blue-eyed son? And what do you do now, my darling young one? I'm going back out for the rain starts falling. I'm going down deep in the deepest black forest, where the people are many and their hands are all empty, where the pellets of poison are flooded their waters, where home in the valley meets a damp, dirty prison, and the executioner's face is always well hidden, where hunger is ugly, where souls are forgotten, where black is the color, where none is the number. And I'll tell it and think it and speak it and breathe it, and reflect from the mountains so all souls can see it. And I'll stand in the ocean until I start sinking, and I'll know my soul well if I start singing. It's hard, it's hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rain's a gonna fall.
Applause for Patti Smith and beautiful interpretation of a hard rain gonna fall, and she just showed that even a superstar like Patti Smith can get a bit nervous at an occasion like this. More than one tear was wept in the audience, as you saw. Special occasion this. I don't think I've seen so many applauses before for any soloist here at the prize ceremony. And now time for the presentation of the Economics Prize. Here we have Professor Per Strömberg.
Ärade pristagare, mina damer och herrar. På en plats där
at the edge of the Mediterranean,
lika hårt, nämligen
outside today's Izmir in Turkey, the Greek city of Teos was located in ancient times. During recent excavations of that city, archaeologists discovered a 1.5 meter high white marble stele with a 50-line long chiseled inscription. It turned out to be a 2,200 years old lease agreement for a property including buildings, farmland and associated slaves. A wealthy man in Teos had donated the property to a nearby gymnasium, but the students, who were busy with their studies and sports, leased it out to the highest bidder. One clause in the detailed agreement gave the owners the right to inspect yearly whether the tenant was keeping the buildings in good repair and taking good care of the farmland. More than half of the lines of the inscription listed the extra fees and penalties that could be charged to the tenant in case of a breach of contract. The agreement also gave the owners the right to hold religious ceremonies on the property 3 days per year. This not only provided the students with spiritual sustenance, but also made their rental income tax-free. In other words, even the ancient Greeks had written contracts with each other. In today's society, contracts are even more important. We enter into job contracts with employees and loan contracts with banks, and we buy insurance to protect ourselves against theft and accidents. The most successful of us can write wills, including provisions that are maintained for more than 100 years. Contracts may be long and full of fine print, but they can also be simple or implied, such as the weekly allowance we promise to give our children if they clean their rooms. Contracts also regulate non-economic relationships at all levels of society, from marriage to constitutional laws to international treaties. Contracts can make us think of unpleasantness in arguments. The tenant in Teos had to accept stringent clauses and threatening sanctions, yet the fundamental aim of contracts is cooperation. A well-written agreement creates a golden compromise between parties with partly divergent interests. Entering into agreements is a difficult art. Poorly designated agreements can lead to deception and unnecessary conflicts. Well-drafted contracts, however, encourage each party to act in a way that benefits everyone. This year's prize in economic sciences is being awarded for theories about writing good contracts. Contracts usually specify payments for certain behaviors or outcomes. Bengt Holmström's work examines both the benefits and drawbacks of such economic rewards. A variable salary can cause us to become more goal-oriented and to work harder. But it can also make us assume excessive risks, focus on the wrong things, and become less enthusiastic about our work. Holmström has also shown how contracts should be adjusted when the parties will be working together over a long period of time, and how good agreements can encourage an individual, even though only team performance can be observed. One common denominator is that contracts must be balanced and adapted to the specific situation. The future is often too complex and unpredictable for a contract to be able to describe all conceivable circumstances. In that case, the contract can regulate who has the right to make decisions in what situations. Oliver Hart's research on incomplete contracts deals with how decision-making rights should be allocated. Among other things, his works provide us with a rich theory of property rights. Perhaps it would have been better for the students in TEOS if they had sold their property to the tenant and saved themselves the trouble to carving out 50 lines of ancient Greek text in marble. Hart's toolkit can be used to understand whether two companies should merge, how to design an effective bankruptcy law, and whether to operate a particular welfare service in the private or public sector.
Dear Professors Hart and Holmström, the blossoming field of contract theory stands firmly on the shoulders of your contributions. With the tools of this theory, we can better understand many real-world contracts and contractual institutions. But more importantly, your work helps us write better contracts to enhance cooperation and welfare. So your research is an outstanding example of practically useful theory in the best sense of the term. It's an honor and a privilege to convey to you, on behalf of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, our warmest congratulations. I now ask you to receive your prizes from His Majesty the King.
Now it's time for King Carl Gustaf to give the diploma and medal to Professor Oliver Hart, a US and British citizen born in the UK and currently living in the US, affiliated with Harvard University there in Boston. The expert on incomplete contracts. He is here with his wife, whom we saw there, Rita Goldberg, and Professor Bengt Holmström, a Finnish citizen born in 1949 in Finland. He is also in the US at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in Boston. He is here today with his wife Anneli Holmström and his son Sam, Anneli in golden dress here, and Sam to the left, as well as friends and colleagues joining him. And now we listen to the Swedish national anthem. Swedish king and queen singing the national anthem, the gamla, the fria. Swedish Central Bank's director, party leader Annie Lööf from the Central Right Party, standing to the right of the right-wing party leader. And here we have members of the Swedish Academy awarding the Literature Prize. Swedish Minister of Culture, Alice Bah Kuhnke, in red. Other members of the political establishment. Now the prize ceremony is over. The laureates have received their Nobel Prizes. And time for the King and Queen to leave the stage to the Queen of Sheba's Festivity March from the Polite Son by Swedish composer Hugo Alvén, which is played while the guests are leaving the auditorium here in the Stockholm Concert Hall. Princess Madeline. conductor Marie Rosenmyr. The laureates are congratulated by the Academy awarding the Literature Prize and the other scientific bodies of the Nobel Foundation of Physics, Chemistry and Medicine. And also the Economics Prize, which was instituted in 1969 by the Swedish Central Bank in memory of Nobel. Being greeted here, and also present this evening are some of the previous laureates that you might see here, such as Stephen Chu, the physics laureates of 97. We also have Frank Wilczek, physics laureate of 2004, and Jean-Marie Lehn, chemics laureate 1987, present. Jean-Marie Lehn, who is a friend of Jean-Pierre Sauvage. And also some medicine laureates, for instance Bengt Samuelsson, who received it in 1982. And you might have spotted also 2006 year's Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus, and medicine laureate of 2009 Elizabeth Blackburn, sitting up here on the podium. We see here Bengt Holmström and Oliver Hart. And to the right there, we have a glimpse of previous year's economics laureate Angus Deaton. The guests are now leaving for the Stockholm City Hall, where the banquet is held, which begins in a couple of hours. A wonderful banquet that will last for more than 4 hours, where the laureates will hold speeches of thanks and finally go up and have a dance or two before they will move on to the Nobel Nightcap, which is sort of an after party held by one of the universities in Stockholm. And now we say thank you very much for joining us here in Stockholm, and have a nice evening.